Okay, welcome to Saturday Night Firing Lines with your host, Douglas Dietrich, human weapon of mass instruction, and I can assure you that right now we are, of course, live and waiting to take your calls. And over here, of course, we have, in my own program, mostly a historical cycle kind of approach to various phenomena. We have a caller, and this is 828. Welcome to the Saturday Night Firing Lines. What's on your mind tonight?
Oh, hey, Douglas. I had a couple comments, and the first of them from your show a couple weeks ago, and I know everybody's diet is personal for them, but you said that it's not possible to be strong and be a vegetarian and healthy. And I wanted to point you to the Engine 2 diet. And what that's about is it's a vegan diet that these firefighters got on. This guy, Rip Esselstyn, his father is a doctor and was involved in a big vegan study, and one of the members in his fire department crew had high cholesterol, so the whole crew of firefighters, and you know how strong they have to be, they became vegan to support him in his dietary changes to get his cholesterol under control. And so then Rip came out with this whole Engine Diet book, a series of books. He's on Facebook. He's all over the Internet. And these guys are living plant-based diet, totally strong. They post, success stories on the Internet every day on Facebook. So I just wanted to point that out to you.
Well, I really appreciate that. No, thank you so much. That's wonderful. Yeah. And I do apologize if I miscommunicated. I don't mean to say that vegetarians are not strong. Obviously, in Asia, you have Buddhistic cultures. Japanese were obviously vegetarian, but they ate fish. And I think what I meant to say was that there are, unfortunately, and you may have run into them, many vegetarians that do not have certain elements in their diet. They need to supplement it with certain supplements because they're not necessarily getting what they would otherwise get if they were just eating meat or eggs. The vegan diet is extremely, how would I say it? It's more extreme than a normal vegetarian diet, and you might want to emphasize that for the listenership. A vegan diet, now correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's not just vegetarian, but also you are abstaining from eggs and from milk, yes?
Correct, yeah. Vegan is only plants. According to the Eat to Live diet, my sister cured her angina in 2 weeks, her diabetes, and her heart disease in 4 months.
That's amazing.
She got all her medication. And the guy that wrote the Eat to Live diet recommends B12 and I think some kind of EFA. He recommends like 3 supplements, but everything else you can get in the vegan diet if you do his plan, which is like a pound of raw greens, pound of cooked greens, like a cup of beans, and a few tablespoons of almonds. But people can be plant strong and healthy. So I just wanted to make that comment. Then the other one, I messaged you on the chat room a couple weeks ago, and I asked you if you thought that sociopathy could be cured, and you said no. And I kind of agree with you, but I kind of hope I'm wrong. And so this is what I wanted to bring up on that one. There's a guy out named Paul Levy, and he wrote a couple books about Watiko, which is pre-Indian word for sociopathy, which means cannibal. That they call it. It's like a cannibalistic mind parasite that takes over being and attempts to infect everybody possible. So it's a highly contagious, malignant, and, most oftentimes fatal disease that seeks to replicate itself in as many humans as possible.
Right.
And he says that through, deep self-examination, spiritual work, blah, 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 you can get over it.
That makes sense.
Pardon?
I was saying that makes sense. That seems sense. But go on.
I think it can be if a person is willing to face up to that. And I see your role. Your role is the great investigator and the great uncoverer of darkness. You reveal the darkness, and that's like the first step of it. And it's like you can't go any further until you actually face the darkness, face what's going on, and uncover it. That's the first step. It's kind of like going through like the 12-step program. And then when I look at it and I go, God, if that's incurable, we may as well leave the planet, because the people that are in control are all sick with it. They're sociopaths at best, psychopaths at worst. You can't lock them up because they're the ones in control. You can't fight them with the same weapons that they use because then you become them. And, you know, what do we do? I mean, we just have to, there has to be a way to defeat this. There has to be a way to reveal the darkness and motivate people to examine themselves, examine every trace of it within themselves, because it hides. And it's kind of like, you know, in the fairy tales, like Rumpelstiltskin, when you name him, you get power over him.
Right.
And it's sort of like when you name the darkness, its little aspects, and you really dive in and delve and do that deep, you know, shadow work, self-examination, and start to name it, start to name all those parts of it, is the first step in defeating it. And just how much work there is to do in that. I look at you as a hero because, you know, you're fighting that fight of revealing that darkness, you know, and yet you stand up before everybody. I mean, this just brought tears to my eyes. I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, you know, you stand up in front of everybody and reveal your own vulnerability as a wounded healer.
Thank you.
You know?
I very much appreciate that, Karen. You're an angel and a saint, and I very much want to let you know that it's good people like yourself that have given me the strength to go on. And I think that's very important for someone in my position to reveal their failings and vulnerabilities, because if I didn't do that preemptively, then there are many predatory parties that represent the sociopathic shall we say, cabal, which you have articulated so well, that would reveal those failings and vulnerabilities for me publicly, because that is how they discredit people. So if you preempt them and reveal that first, you've basically eliminated.
They blackmail people. Yeah.
Yes, and by being an open book, I've eliminated the overwhelming majority of their primary means of attack, which is one of I mean a good example would be oh God, I don't know if I should give his name, but there was an individual who was a 911 truther, a 9/11 truther is the correct word for it, and he was a engineer, and he was very famous. He was active in the 9/11 truth movement for a while. Then I saw him at a convention where he was with this incredibly gorgeous young lady who I assumed, just being who I am, that he had hired an escort because he was fairly elderly. He was balding. He's bespectacled. It was not a natural coupling. and later on, he came out and said, "Oh, you know, I've done what I could for the movement, and I'm going to withdraw." And so often, this is what happens: is that some young lady will be. You would think it would be cheaper to kill somebody, but if you kill somebody, you validate what they're saying. And so rather than kill somebody, what they often do is, for instance, they will pair somebody up with some young lady who will basically drag them out of the community, basically tell them, oh, it's too dangerous, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, let's seek a life of happiness together. And then, of course, they withdraw, and within 3 to 5 years at the longest, she'll basically run him dry, discredit him in a number of ways, and then leave him. And if she's married him, then it's really a problem because she'll divorce him and take what she can. And they're usually left in such a discredited state that everything that they have said beforehand has been discredited. So that there's an enormous amount of problems being in the position of a whistleblower or an investigator. So you point that out, and believe me, your own wisdom and your own compassion is very much appreciated. But before I let you go, I do want to emphasize that there are, of course, I believe that you are correct. There are ways in which sociopathy can be redirected. We have, for instance, some things are a bit too fantastic to really, shall we say, accept other than as entertainment. A good one would be Dexter, where a psychotic serial killer is taken and channeled in a direction where he's basically supposedly doing productive police work. And it's very difficult to get someone of that frame of mind to work within a framework like that. And without, say, for instance, torture or conditioning that is quite violent. So it gets very morally iffy when we go in those areas. But for sociopathy, one of the solutions that somebody once thought of, a man named James White, who used to specialize in writing medical science fiction, he thought of the majority of the world being divided into wolves and sheep, and he thought that mankind needed to really cultivate the sheep dogs, which are essentially wolves that have been domesticated to guide and protect the sheep from the wolves. That's all dogs are wolves, but so there is a middle ground that he spoke of, and I think that helps to articulate some of what you're speaking of. And believe me, it's not like there's any reason for us to shall we say, as you said, give up in terms of where we're at. Obviously, mankind has abided to this point with many positive people who have helped to keep him from sliding into the darkness. So all love and light to you, Karen, and you're welcome to call back anytime. We will turn to 813. Thank you so much for your patience. What brings you on air tonight?
There was something that I heard in passing. I wasn't sure exactly what the context was, what you were talking about, but I think you mentioned Japanese turtles, and there was the basis. You guess it was the basis of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's where they got it from, or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was rather alarmed. I had always assumed the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise was entirely an American mutation.
I collected the old comic books. Do you remember the old Eastern Alert comic books? I used to collect those when I was a kid. I mean, they were great books.
No, they were, and actually I very much appreciate it. There were some attempts to make some more serious versions in black and white that were far more artistic, that took them to a more kind of serious occult sense of mood, in which they were kind of manifesting, representing four elements. The problem with that, of course, is you're trying to conflate a number of paradigms, and the four elements are, of course, a European concept, whereas in Asia there are always five. But I was actually rather shocked to find that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles actually were created in Japan. They actually originated as a Japanese series of manga or anime, but yes, they are somewhat of an allegory for the kappa, and also an allegory for the kind of ancient races or relic populations that were far more extant at the time of the continent of Mu, or Panmu, which was a massive Pacific continent that has since become submerged, and of which the Japanese archipelago is vestigial of. It is a vestigial remnant of that sunken continent, as well as many other island chains in the Pacific. So the turtles, it needs to be remembered, are some of the oldest creatures in the world. They were here before dinosaurs. And so the idea that they evolved a sentiency in that span of millions of years, or rather certain species of them, is not at all shocking. And to put this into context for the listenership, what we have to remember is that we, as a species of mammalian, whether we or not accept the different evolutionary theories, and there's many different evolutionary theories. The evolutionary theory that is taught in America, we have to remember, just like any evolutionary theory taught in the Third Reich, or taught in the Soviet Union, or communist China, or anywhere else, is subject to political ideology. So based on American political ideology, we are indoctrinated in American schools in a certain evolutionary theory that other nations do not entertain or agree to. So the evolutionary theory we're taught is that we're all evolved from primates out of Africa. This is what we're taught in the United States. There's plenty of nations that do not accept that theory at all. And some, during the 60s and 70s, there was an experimental kind of conceptual idea that was actually bantered around, that humanity had evolved from cetacea, or porpoise-like mammalians, or dolphin-like mammalians. And then some people were even arguing that females of the human species evolved from that, whereas males of the human species evolved from the primates. Now, I'm not saying I accept any of these doctrines, but the fact remains that humanity, whether we evolved from cetaceans or primates, there are still primates that are obviously not human. And there are still cetaceans that are obviously not human, no matter who we evolved from. And the end result is, when I speak of sentient species of bipedal turtles, that does not mean that four-legged turtles as we understand them, or finned sea turtles, did not exist simultaneously. When I bring this up, people think of all the other species disappearing, and suddenly you have this sentient bipedal species, like somehow they all formed a gestalt and merged and created it or something. You know what I mean?